Stick with me here. Before passing, Queen Elizabeth handed Camilla the most brutal calculated public humiliation imaginable. Camilla had her greedy eyes completely locked on one specific prize, the exact pearls that once graced Diana's neck. She desperately wanted them and made it obvious. But the Queen's next move, absolute ice. The matriarch took those legendary pearls and draped them around Catherine's neck right in Camilla's face. That face slap only made Camilla double down. She pushed relentlessly, demanding jewel after jewel, with a frantic desperation that genuinely shocked the entire royal court. Then, the Queen initiated her endgame. Her absolute final decision before passing away was a devastating strike that Camilla never even saw coming. And honestly, she hasn't recovered since. Total ambush. The exact second Catherine stepped into that chapel, Camilla's entire reality just shattered into pieces. Flashback to April 2021. The whole royal family gathered inside St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle to finally lay Prince Philip to rest. The globe was watching. Every single camera, every journalist, every gossip watcher alive had their lenses absolutely glued to the inside of that chapel. The family walked in one by one, masked up, spaced apart with heavy grief weighing down every face. But then Catherine entered the room, draped around her neck a four-strand pearl choker, glowing utterly perfect. Now watch closely. If you and I know anything about royal history, our stomachs drop right here. Because these were not some random gems, these were Princess Diana's personal pearls. The literal exact choker Diana wore back in November 1982 at the massive Hampton Court Palace banquet during the Dutch state visit. The look that made the entire planet fall in love with her. The very same pearls locked deep inside a royal vault for almost 20 long years. Why? Because absolutely nobody was considered worthy enough to ever put them on again. Let that sink in. 2 whole decades sitting in a dark box, completely untouched, just waiting. And the Queen just unlocked it, placing those legendary pearls right on Catherine's neck at her own husband's funeral. Right when every single camera on earth was aimed straight at the family. Meanwhile, Camilla was trapped sitting just a few feet away. She couldn't move a muscle, couldn't make a single sound. Lenses from around the globe were sweeping across the family every couple of seconds. Billions of eyes were watching their every move. So she sat frozen, back totally straight, hands folded tight, face completely empty. And those iconic pearls just glowed under the chapel's bright lights, while the entire world watched and literally felt the ghost of Diana walk straight back into that room, right into the empty seat sitting directly next to Camilla. And there was absolutely nothing Camilla could do to stop it. Body language experts studying the footage later pointed out that what they caught on Camilla's face, definitely not grief. Her jaw was locked completely shut, her eyes looked flat and ruthless. And during those split seconds when the cameras captured her from the perfect angle, something dark flickered behind her eyes, something that had absolutely zero to do with mourning Prince Philip. It looked like pure, unadulterated fury, the exact type of boiling anger a person has been sitting on for a very long time now, brutally forced to swallow it down in public. Camilla never even once glanced directly at Catherine's neck. She simply didn't need to. She already knew exactly what legendary prize was sitting right there. She understood the ultimate meaning, and knowing that truth was actively destroying her. Queen Elizabeth II personally authorized every single piece Catherine wore to that massive funeral. And she picked Diana's pearls entirely on purpose, with Camilla sitting right there during the most watched royal event in literal years. You and I both know that wasn't an accident. It was a cold, precise, and completely devastating power move. But get this, that savage chapel moment didn't just happen overnight. The Queen had been building towards this exact trap for years, quietly, methodically blocking her one jewel at a time. To truly grasp what the matriarch was pulling off, we have to rewind to where it all actually started. Back to 2005, when Camilla first strutted through those palace doors as Charles's wife and pulled a stunt that set the Queen's jaw like absolute stone. The very second Camilla married Charles, she became legally entitled to use the style of Princess of Wales. Yeah, Diana's iconic title, the name the entire planet still cried over. And then Camilla's team did something genuinely, honestly disturbing. According to Palace leaks, her crew aggressively pushed for Camilla to claim that exact title. Camilla herself was even overheard, blurting out exactly what she thought about the situation. She reportedly snapped, "I am the one who is actually standing right here. I am the one right beside him. That title is far more fitting for me than anyone else." The royal inner circle was left absolutely speechless because this wasn't just some random noble wanting a fancy name. This was the exact woman who ruined Diana's marriage, boldly standing right in the literal rubble of everything Diana lost, demanding to wear her sacred name. The entire palace exploded in outrage, and the Queen's counterattack was lightning fast and absolute. Camilla would be named Duchess of Cornwall, nothing more. Not a single tiny syllable of Diana's legendary title would ever pass down to her hands. Boom. Game over before it even really started. But of course, Camilla wasn't completely finished. She was a top tier senior royal now. She demanded flashy jewels for big state events, and the royal family's vault was massive. Centuries of diamonds, pearls, and rubies sitting in velvet. And trust me, you and I are going to want to see what she grabs next. Let's dive right into this vicious royal scandal. There was space for her. But the Queen was already drawing invisible battle lines that Camilla couldn't even see. Behind those palace doors, the Queen's personal dresser, Angela Kelly, the ultimate gatekeeper to the royal vault, started tracking literally every single request Camilla dared to make. Think about that. Every sparkling piece of jewelry had to be strictly approved in writing before it ever touched Camilla's skin. They called it standard protocol, sure, but everyone who actually knew how this palace operated knew exactly what this was. A golden leash, and Camilla was completely tied to it. Instead, she was redirected to the Queen. Murder's collection, the massive honeycomb tiara, and those heavy multi-strand pearl chokers locked tight with enormous diamond clasps. Sure, they were absolutely breathtaking, but the Queen actually weaponized them with cold precision because these pieces belonged to a dead era. Just gorgeous ancient relics with zero heartbeat, no connection at all to the living future of the monarchy. The Queen was basically wrapping Camilla up in the past, keeping the entire future far out of her reach. And Camilla had zero clue this trap was set. Then 2011 hits. Catherine marries William. The whole world watched her walk down that Westminster Abbey aisle, wearing a stunning tiara straight from the Queen's personal vault stash, and the global reaction was absolute madness. Catherine looked flawless. The public was totally obsessed, and literally overnight something shifted deep inside those palace walls. Insiders close to Camilla claimed the temperature dropped completely right after that massive wedding. Now, pay attention here because things get messy. Camilla reportedly pushed through channels insisting that, as the future king's wife, she deserved total seniority over Catherine when picking out jewels for major state events. She practically demanded having first Access. She needed the queen to validate her rank using the royal vault. But the queen dead silent. Total. Calculated silence. But a massive shadow game was moving quietly in the background, and Camilla had no clue what was coming. After Diana passed in 1997, her iconic pearl choker went straight into the vault box, locked tight, because the queen knew those exact pearls were way too painful, too deeply tied to Diana's legacy to just hand out to anyone. Letting the wrong woman wear them, that would be a total PR disaster. So she kept that box sealed shut. She waited and she carefully watched until she finally spotted someone she deemed truly worthy to carry the massive weight of those pearls, without completely breaking under the pressure. And just months after Camilla made her bold demand for better royal jewels, that legendary box was silently unlocked for the very first time in 20 years. The choker was polished, prepped, and it went directly around Catherine's neck. Boom! That was the Queen's opening strike, and it landed exactly on target. One perfectly calculated move that Camilla could never openly fight and never recover from. But guess what? That was just the beginning. Because the Queen wasn't just hiding one shiny necklace from Camilla, she was literally locking the entire future of the monarchy far away from her, handing it piece by very piece to Catherine. So I know what you're thinking. Did Camilla actually try to fight back? And what went down when she did? Welcome to the Vault War. The Queen never sat Camilla down, never looked her in the eyes to explain herself, never dropped a single formal decree. Her weapon of choice, diamonds. And every single time she opened that vault for Catherine and slammed it on Camilla, the brutal message grew darker. Now, to grasp the insane power dynamics happening inside that vault, you have to understand one major fact first. The royal jewelry collection isn't just a mountain of flashy accessories. Every single piece holds centuries of bloodline history, memory, and meaning that runs incredibly deep. And the most legendary pieces, they carry something way heavier than gold. They hold the literal visual identity of the entire monarchy. So when the queen chose who wore what, she definitely wasn't just playing fashion police. She was actively choosing who the future belonged to. And her mind was firmly set. The absolute most valuable item sitting inside that royal vault is the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace. We're talking a flawless Cartier masterpiece. Geometric diamonds set with such crazy precision that the whole thing looks less like an accessory and more like pure architecture. Gifted to the Queen for her 1947 wedding by the ruler of Hyderabad, she flexed it heavily in the early iconic portraits of her reign. Those exact photos ended up on currency stamps and history books all across the globe. That necklace isn't just ice, it's the literal visual face of the Elizabethan era itself, the exact image people pictured when they thought of a young, unstoppable, radiant queen. And Camilla, she never even got within striking distance of it. The queen never once bothered explaining her strategy to anyone. She didn't have to. But those watching closely, they understood the ruthless game perfectly. Camilla was never meant to be a long reigning queen. She was older, entering late into the ultimate royal hierarchy. Her time as queen consort would be short before the crown passed directly to William and Catherine. Just a transitional figure. Important, sure, but temporary. And trust me, you and I both know karma doesn't miss. Stick with me here, you do not hand the most priceless, historically massive necklace in the entire kingdom to someone just passing through. No. You hand it to the woman who will stand right there in 20, 30, or even 50 years, holding the entire monarchy's weight on her shoulders long after everyone else fades away. And that chosen absolute powerhouse was Catherine. It was always going to be her. So in 2014, the Queen made a huge move, loaning the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace to Catherine for a massive official gala. She wore it. The entire globe watched. And in one single night, the Queen dropped decades of absolute prestige right onto Catherine's shoulders, snatching it completely away from Camilla. The underlying message: zero subtlety, zero accidents. The heaviest hitter in the vault, the exact piece defining the Queen's personal legendary era. And identity now belonged permanently to Catherine's legacy. Not Camilla, never Camilla. But look, this woman does not easily give up. Palace insiders say right around this time she shifted tactics. She became way more deliberate, highly calculated with her approach. She started loudly praising specific jewels right in front of the staff and even the Queen herself. Then, now pay attention here. This next moment proves exactly how far Camilla was actually willing to push her luck. Ataba, closed door family meetup. She openly targeted the Cambridge pearl brooch. Let me explain the massive weight of what that brooch actually meant, because it makes the coming payback absolutely devastating. This was never just a shiny trinket worn to boring diplomatic parties or TV spots. This piece was the Queen's literal daily companion. She pinned it on for Christmas speeches, quiet afternoon events, and massive milestone portraits across 70 long years of her absolute reign. It was basically the ultimate symbol of her unmoving, rock solid presence. Honestly, it was less jewelry and more a piece of the Queen's own soul. And the sheer audacity of what Camilla did next. She quietly asked if she could borrow it for a future event. The Queen just smiled, stayed dead silent, and then the very next year, an absolute masterstroke happened. That brooch landed on Catherine. Not for a generic state dinner, not for some random diplomatic room, but for a portrait. Catherine and William's first joint portrait dropped in 2022. Literally the most hyped, widely spread image of the monarchy's future generation. And guess what? The Cambridge pearl brooch was sitting right there, on Catherine front and center for the whole planet. Camilla's little request ignored completely. No yes, no rejection, just wiped from existence. Instead, she got answered in platinum and pure diamonds, totally publicly locked into a photograph destined to hang on walls for the next 100 years. Next up was Queen Alexandra's wedding necklace, and man, this specific piece was pure, unadulterated poison for Camilla. To get exactly why, you have to realize what it actually meant. It was a crazy diamond and pearl artifact handed as a wedding gift to Queen Alexandra way back in 1863. And from that exact second on, it became permanently chained to one massive thing, the Princess of Wales title. The exact rank Camilla was totally denied. The very title that still had Diana's legacy burned deep into every single letter. So when the Queen Mother passed in 2002, this epic necklace transferred to Queen Elizabeth II, and she did something insanely calculated with it. She threw it straight into the dark vault and stayed dead silent. The thing just vanished behind locked doors, all while Camilla kept showing up to royal banquet after banquet, formal event after stiff reception year after year. That necklace never once surfaced for her until 2018, when Catherine rocked it to a Buckingham Palace event. Let that sink in for a second. Camilla was standing in that exact room. The necklace, permanently locked to the Princess of Wales title. The rank Camilla was denied, flaunted openly by Catherine, the true Princess of Wales, at a massive formal event, breathing the exact same air as Camilla. The Queen didn't have to speak a single word. That jewelry screamed every savage thought she kept hidden out loud. By this point, Camilla totally realized a massive choice had been made behind her back. The royal vault wasn't shared fairly. It was a weapon being aimed, and the target was always identical away from her and straight onto Catherine every single time. So she made a move that absolutely nobody found. Surprising. She went straight to Charles. Whether she pushed him directly, or he noticed it himself and chose to act. Charles started working the shadows, demanding Camilla get way more respect through high-tier jewelry access. He brought it straight to the Queen. And here is her savage counterattack. Every single time Charles pushed for Camilla, she leveled up. Catherine immediately. She handed Catherine something bigger, way more legendary, and far more historic. Whenever Charles tried taking one step forward for Camilla, the Queen countered, slamming Catherine's roots deeper into the monarchy. Trust me, you and I see the lesson here. Camilla gained zero, and Catherine conquered everything. He learned incredibly fast and painfully that fighting his own mother was an absolutely unwinnable war. But here is the one massive twist that Camilla did not see coming. Stick with me here, because those giant tiaras and flashy necklaces, those were just surface level battle scars. Those flashy pieces were exactly the ones she could easily track, understand, and fight for. But the absolute most devastating losses were the hidden ones. The quiet, fiercely private jewels built purely from love. That is the ultimate personal blow. Because in this royal world, there are jewels that command governments, and then there are jewels that speak directly to the soul. Queen Elizabeth II completely understood that exact difference, guarding those deeply personal pieces 10 times more fiercely than the state crowns, because those massive historic necklaces and tiaras, those were just about raw power, royal legacy, and protecting the crown's flawless image. But the quiet, everyday hidden pieces meant something else entirely. They revealed exactly who the Queen truly, genuinely trusted with her private heart, who actually deserved to carry her real, authentic life forward, not just a public brand. And this exact moment is where Camilla's absolute rejection stopped being political and became deeply, permanently personal. The iconic Cambridge pearl brooch already exposed part of that brutal truth. The Queen wore it for 70 years. It was her everyday armor, her quiet, unspoken shadow. When Camilla practically begged for it, the Queen just smiled, said absolutely nothing, and then handed it straight to Catherine for a history making, generation defining portrait. That was not just denying Camilla a shiny piece of jewelry. That was the absolute ultimate. Queen looking dead at both women and actively choosing who she authentically trusted, who she truly wanted to carry her actual core. Royal identity forward after death. Camilla was definitely not that woman. But listen, absolutely nothing in this entire royal war cuts quite as deep as the Edinburgh wedding bracelet. Pay close attention here, because to see why this piece is so devastating, you must understand exactly where it originated before grasping the massive insult of Catherine receiving it, while Camilla got absolutely nothing. Now, this bracelet is surprisingly modest by royal standards. Platinum set with diamonds. Not wildly grand, not theatrical, not the kind of flashy thing that makes massive headlines at state banquets. But the dark history behind those exact diamonds will completely hollow your soul out if you let yourself actually feel it. Prince Philip's mother was Princess Alice, and her tragic life remains one of the absolute most devastatingly heartbreaking stories in the entire history of the British royal family. She was cruelly declared mentally ill by ruthless doctors who completely misunderstood her. She was forcibly ripped away from her children and locked up completely against her own will. She lost literally everything she held dear. She eventually surrendered all her worldly possessions entirely, choosing to spend her final lonely years, living deep inside Buckingham Palace, wearing a plain nun's habit, deciding that this cruel material world had absolutely nothing left to offer. Her. Philip grew up carrying that trauma, knowing exactly what his mother suffered, knowing the unbearable kind of deep, dark pain that gets quietly buried inside royal families and strictly never spoken about out loud. So when he was finally preparing to marry the young woman who would become Queen Elizabeth II, he completely dismantled his mother's sacred tiara, breaking it apart. To have those diamonds painfully reset into a bracelet, a wedding gift for his bride. He was handing over the most incredibly precious thing he actually owned in this world, a physical piece of his broken, deeply loved mother, a heavy fragment of his own tragic history and intense grief, beautifully transformed into something she could literally carry every single day. The Queen wore that exact bracelet for 73 long years. Now you and I both see the heavy impact here. She passed it to Catherine, absolutely bypassing Camilla. Think about what that brutal choice actually means. This was the most intimate object the Queen owned, the literal physical embodiment of her marriage. Rare peace, born from a mother's immense suffering and a husband's deep devotion given by a young prince to the one woman he was choosing to spend his entire mortal life with. The Queen looked at every single woman in that royal family and ruthlessly decided the only person worthy of holding that heavy history of wearing that true love on her wrist was Catherine. Camilla had stood by Charles's side for actual decades. She was legally his official wife. She sat at those identical royal tables, attended the exact same elite events, and carried the same senior royal title. And the Queen looked at all of that effort and still said a hard no. The bracelet goes to Catherine. And here is the part that makes it even darker, even more strategic. There were zero written instructions. The Queen never left a single formal decree about any of these legacy pieces. She never once sat down, documented her real intentions, or signed anything official. Angela Kelly strictly managed. The vault access and certain royal items were just simply understood, telepathically known by everyone inside those massive palace walls without ever being spoken out loud. The elite designated pieces for Catherine were absolutely not a secret. They were an unbreakable system quietly built up over long years, communicated entirely through pure action, and completely impossible to challenge because nothing was ever officially written down, which means Camilla could never legally fight it. You cannot take someone to court over a pearl brooch that was never formally promised to you or a devastating bracelet handed over without a single word of physical documentation. The brilliant queen had built an iron wall around Catherine. Think about it with me, no doors, no windows, zero weak points anywhere. Camilla could only see. Stick with me here, this royal drama gets absolutely wild. She couldn't break through not an inch. Then, on September 8th, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II took her last breath at Balmoral Castle, and instantly every single lock in that legendary vault changed hands overnight. Camilla completely shut out, managed, silenced, and systematically denied. For 17 brutal years, suddenly had absolute unchecked access to everything. So, what did she actually do with it? She completely burned it all down. Enter the aftermath. The queen was barely gone before Camilla made her ultimate power play. She now held full, unrestricted access to one of the greatest royal jewelry collections in human history. 70 years of the late Queen's intensely careful, deliberate curation, just sitting in velvet lined drawers, waiting for a master. And Camilla finally held the master key to every single one. The first massive flex she made was the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara. And you really need to understand what this legendary artifact actually is before getting why wearing it was such a massive, aggressive statement. This tiara is staggering, purely imposing. It's basically built around one insane 93.7 carat emerald, surrounded by a blinding platinum lattice of diamonds that perfectly frames it exactly like a throne. Crafted back in 1919, it entered the Royal Vault in 1942 when a high society hostess named Dame Margaret Greville dropped her entire jaw dropping jewelry collection to the Queen Mother. The tiara arrived with it, and then it essentially vanished into the shadows. For 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II kept it totally locked down, not because it wasn't breathtaking to look at, but because it was politically dangerous. This tiara was scooped up during the violent, incredibly chaotic aftermath of the Russian Revolution. Now, pay attention here. Its dark origins were exactly the type that made international diplomats sweat bullets. The Queen knew perfectly well that a reigning monarch wearing this crown on the global stage would immediately invite heavy questions about the dark, bloody history of how these aristocratic treasures actually changed hands during that insane time period. Questions the royal family simply couldn't afford to answer, so she sealed it away in the dark. The only time she ever let it see daylight was loaning it to Princess Eugenie for her 2018 wedding, a strictly private family event safely shielded from messy geopolitical scrutiny. But Camilla, she wore it to a massive diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle in late 2025. She was making a vicious statement with every single diamond on that crown. The old rules are dead. I am the boss now. I have total access to everything that was kept from me. Watch me take it all back. And the world definitely watched, just not how she wanted. You and I know what happens next. Within hours, royal commentators and diplomatic experts started raising the exact scandalous questions the Queen had spent 70 years actively dodging. The murky origins, the bloody revolutionary past. Those incredibly uncomfortable questions about extreme aristocratic wealth and where it really came from. That protective layer of carefully crafted mystery the Queen maintained for 7 straight decades completely dissolved in one single evening. Camilla hadn't triumphantly brought some forgotten masterpiece back into the light. No, she accidentally smashed down the entire wall. The Queen had heavily fortified around it, letting every single uncomfortable question flood right in. But, oh, she wasn't finished yet. In March 2026, the Nigerian president visited Britain for a formal state banquet. Camilla showed up absolutely dripping in the late Queen's A, personal Cartier bracelets tacked heavily up her wrists. These were pieces Elizabeth wore as quiet, everyday staples, definitely not as massive power statements. And above them, a towering sapphire tiara that absolutely dominated the room. She was flaunting every piece, like a stolen trophy, like a pure conquest, like someone who finally smashed into a room they'd been locked out of for literal decades, wanting every single person in that room to see exactly what she plundered. And then Catherine arrived. She was wearing just one single tiara, the lover's knot. Now you have to feel the absolute crushing weight of what that crown meant in that specific room on that specific night. The lover's knot tiara was commissioned by Queen Mary in 1913, and it is not a light or delicate little piece. It's built from blinding, brilliant cut diamonds and 19 hanging pearls set in silver and gold, and it is notoriously almost punishingly heavy to wear. Princess Diana famously rocked it, claiming it gave her headaches so severe she could barely survive the evening. But she kept wearing it anyway because it became her ultimate signature, her personal crown, the one thing that made her look exactly like the icon she was. The Queen had made absolutely certain that this specific tiara went straight to Catherine, because handing it to anyone else, and especially handing it to Camilla, would have been a catastrophic, fatal misreading of everything the public still deeply felt about Diana. By ensuring Catherine became its next true keeper, the Queen allowed the tiara to actually shine again. She allowed it to carry Diana's powerful memory forward without being poisoned by the unbelievably complicated, painful history of the 1990s. So, when Catherine walked into that banquet wearing it, she didn't need to stack anything at all. She didn't need to display conquest aggressively, announce her access, or pile on carrots to make her presence felt. She simply walked right in, and the lover's knot sat on her head perfectly. And you and I both know it looked just like Diana herself had placed it there. Stick with me, we are diving into pure royal drama. Every single camera in that room instantly abandoned Camilla. Not because Catherine wore more diamonds. She actually had fewer. But the second Catherine stepped in, wearing that lover's knot tiara, the entire room shifted. They felt the absolute weight of Princess Diana's memory. The Queen's very deliberate endorsement. 17 years of quiet, patient, totally unshakable grace. Everything crashing into that room at the exact same time. Now Camilla definitely wore more jewels than Catherine, more carats, more historical pieces, way more raw access to the royal vault than she ever had before. But she lost that room, completely, totally, and instantly without a single word even being spoken. Because here is the brutal truth that this entire scandal has been building toward all along. There was exactly one thing Camilla could never grab from that vault, not even with the Queen gone, not even with total access to every single drawer, every velvet box, and every locked display case inside Buckingham Palace. She absolutely could not buy the Queen's true endorsement. She could never earn that private trust. She couldn't get that special brooch handed over with a quiet, knowing smile. She couldn't get the bracelet crafted from a late mother's tiara. She couldn't get that iconic pearl choker placed so deliberately around her neck while the whole world watched Diana's ghost completely fill that room. And now here is the darkest part. Now pay attention here, this gets wild. Camilla has the legal power to request those pieces Catherine is holding right now. There is zero formal written protection for Catherine's access. No royal decree, absolutely no signed document anywhere. The Queen never actually wrote it down, which means, technically speaking, right at this moment, Camilla could demand the lover's knot tiara back. She could demand the pearl choker. She could take the Edinburgh wedding bracelet. And there is literally nothing on paper stopping her. But she won't do it. And deep down, she knows exactly why she won't. Because stealing those specific pieces from Catherine wouldn't magically hand Camilla the Queen's legacy. It wouldn't give her the true endorsement or the deep trust or the sheer grace those jewels represent. It would only prove to the entire world that she is exactly the exact kind of woman who desperately grabs for things never meant for her. She already learned that painful lesson She learned it publicly for 17 years. You and I both felt the sting right down in the funeral chapel, with Diana's iconic pearls glowing around Catherine's neck just a few feet away. She learned it in the dead silence right after asking for a brooch, when the Queen just coldly smiled. She learned it at a massive state banquet, stacking every single shiny trophy she could find onto her wrists, and still losing the entire room to a woman wearing just one tiara. The Queen is gone now. The vault is wide open. Camilla has everything she was completely denied for nearly 2 decades. And she's still lost. Because those royal jewels were never actually about the jewels. They were always about what Queen Elizabeth II saw when looking at these two very different women. One she trusted with her marriage and her memories and her deeply private self. The one she handed her most intimate possessions over to without a single word of explanation, because absolutely zero explanation was needed. And the other, she dressed her appropriately, adorned her sufficiently, provided grandly, and kept her at a careful, totally deliberate and permanent distance. Those diamonds will outlast all of them completely cold and unchanged, sitting in their velvet boxes long after every single woman in this scandal is gone. But the light they cast will always, always depend entirely on the woman wearing them. So, what do you and I take from this? The Queen chose her true successor a very long time ago.